Hi everybody, we're here with Mr. Jayen Shah. Your resume is quite impressive, and the amount of studies, etc., that goes into this field is really a lot. So, could you please comment on your journey in this field and like a general idea about investment banking?
Yeah, sure, Aryan. I will. My journey generally began in, I guess, 2001 when I joined business school. So I went to business school at Emory, which is in Atlanta, where I got my MBA. And then, after graduating, I worked for about 4 years in consulting with Pricewaterhouse. After that, I changed my career actually to join Merrill Lynch in New York on the investment banking side. Okay. And for personal reasons, we moved back to India from New York. I moved back to Mumbai in 2010, but it was through Merrill itself. So I still continue to work with Merrill Lynch and then worked there for 4 more years in India. And then since 2014, I'm now working at a Japanese investment bank called Mizuho, where I've been here. Now I've been here for 7 years. So my journey collectively is for about, I guess, 20 years now, since I went to business school, did consulting, did investment banking. Yeah, so that's my journey.
You spoke about how you went to business school. So, like, what subjects, like, what exactly, like, business is a vast area. So, what subjects should one take to directly enter the field of investment banking? And what would you say are the levels of the subject? Because, like, there are different levels to each subject that they should focus on from the college level itself before applying to university.
So from an investment banking standpoint, obviously, finance is any subject to do with finance is always very useful. Basic, not any advanced math, but at least you should be familiar with basic math, right? That's the second. Accounting and economics. Those were two other classes that I would recommend. So from a business school standpoint, it would be finance, accounting, economics, and basic math.
So, for someone who's just getting into the field of investment banking, fresh out of university, what would you say is the job, like career progression for them? Like to be hired by a bank as an analyst, I guess, at first, and then to be at the stage that you are today. So, at least in the current industry, what would they have to like work at in a company for to be hired at the same level as you are?
So it's a good question. So when you look at any traditional investment bank, at least so there are different departments in investment banking, right? So the term investment banking covers many different businesses. Okay, to make it simple, there are three businesses that it typically covers. First is the traditional M&A investment banking, traditional M&A business advisory. It's called in different banks. It's called by different names, but some banks call it advisory. Some banks call it M&A. So different words. Some bank call it corporate finance. All kinds of different names are used, but essentially it is the advisory or M&A business. To make it simple, the second department of investment banking is what we call equity capital markets, which is to do with basically your equity, your trading of equities, sales, trading of equities. Okay. And the third is basically what we call debt capital markets, which is basically on the debt side. So there are two forms of basic capital, which I guess you will, if you don't already know, I'm sure you will get to know as you sort of go into business school and get into this career. But there are two kinds of capital basically. There is debt and there is equity. Okay. And so the investment bank is also divided into those two sort of groups. There's an equity group and there's a debt group. And then there is the M&A group. So depending on the group you join, the career trajectory depends on that group, basically. But typically, you start as an analyst when you join, as a fresher right out of undergraduate school. If you join out of graduate school, then some banks bring you in as an associate. And as you move ahead, it's a flat structure, so there are not many levels within the investment bank. So once you move ahead, you can move from analyst to associate to senior to senior to manager. to vice president to director to managing director. So those are the typical levels that one goes through in investment banking.
You mentioned that there are different levels to investment banking, and like you mentioned that the kind of education you have and the level of education you have, where like it depends that based on that you get a certain starting position as such. So to move up to the stage that you're at today, is it necessary to have an MBA or something like that, or if you just work for the company, it'll happen on its own?
It really depends on where you get employed. There are very many examples that I know where people, where colleagues and friends who have actually joined as an analyst out of undergraduate school have not got an MBA and have still gone from an analyst to becoming managing director and head of their business in some cases. But in most cases, I would say roughly more than 90% of the time, uh, the investment banks tend to recruit out of business school. They tend to prefer MBAs.
Like for a investment banker, what would you say are the working hours, and how would you say that it changes based on your promotions as such? And do you think that at first, what did you find difficult when you just had joined the company as a fresher? Did you find anything difficult, and how has your life at the company or at this industry changed since?
Yeah. So working hours, are long. Okay. So working hours when you're more junior, of course, are longer because you tend to do a lot of the actual work required, whether it is preparing, using preparing an Excel worksheet or preparing presentations, right? So it's typically performed by the more junior employees. So when you just join the investment bank, that is basically the role that an analyst or an associate tends to play, and therefore the work hours are quite long. And in some cases, it can even be as long as 12, sometimes 15 hours a day of work, even on weekends. So sometimes it gets quite hectic, the schedule. Okay. But as you sort of grow senior and you already learn everything that there is to learn, or most of whatever is there is to learn, then your work hours become a little more easier and a little more manageable. Okay, but having said that, in recent times, you asked the question, how have things changed? So in recent times, people have become a little bit more relaxed, perhaps because there is access to better technology. It's easier to prepare your materials and presentations, etc. So your work hours become shorter in that sense, and so now people are a lot more aware and respectful of people's time.
You mentioned that at the beginning that you bounced between different careers before landing on investment banking and switching to investment banking. So how did you make your decision? Because even now, many students like they struggle to make the decision of what career path to take, or even what subjects to choose, whether it's science or commerce, or what kind of education to take. So how did you personally make the decision?
The decision was basically driven by my interest in finance, my interest in accounting, finance, etc. So there was a basic interest in that field. So it was driven by that. Uh, Also, personally, this is more of a personal decision, of course. But having done consulting for a few years, I realized that the where I would actually grow and where I would feel like I would be learning or adding to my skill set is when I actually advise companies on strategic decisions that involve growing their business through acquiring new companies or getting into new markets, right? And therefore raising capital to enter new markets or new businesses. Okay, so it was a combination of a few things: finance, accounting, just my overall feeling that where I would be, where I would see more growth. All those decisions, all those thoughts helped me make that decision.
You are a very high position in your company. So, like based on your personal judgment, who would you hire to your company? Like in terms of qualifications, skills, and stuff that they should have like prerequisite knowledge of before joining the company.
I think the biggest the biggest decision personally for me is when somebody who has a clear reason or clear can articulate clearly why they would want to join investment banking, right? So if you can clearly articulate that, what is your desire, then I think that is enough of a reason. The challenges with hiring in investment banking is basically you need to have the ability to work long hours, and you should be open for that kind of environment. Okay. The rest of the work that an investment banking business does is not so technical, or it's not rocket science that you cannot learn on the job. Okay. As I said, it's basic maths. Some, of course, you need some knowledge of finance and accounting, etc. But it's not so technical and so deep that it is impossible to learn on the job. The biggest, from personally from my perspective, the biggest qualification criteria is a clear reason and a clear articulation of why somebody would want to do investment banking.
What is the final like advice that you would have for any students that are watching, and what would you say to them, and how would you help them make their choice?
So students who are watching, I'm assuming, would be at least having some basic interest in joining an investment bank. So what I would suggest is at a early stage, understand basically, not, you don't need to be an expert, but at least basically understand what is an investment bank, who are the large investment banks globally, what is happening in the space, which are the business, what business areas do investment banking banks cover, and all this is very easy to understand when you visit websites of the large investment banks, whether it's the US banks or a European bank or even Japanese banks. So these details are available. So first learn about the industry, basic, whatever you can from basic desktop research. Then obviously make sure that you choose subjects that prepare you for a career in investment banking. So as I mentioned, I've covered those kind of subjects earlier in my comments. So make sure you choose such subjects, and try and research. If there is a desire to join an investment bank, try and research where the investment banks recruit from. So there are very selective schools from where investment banks actually recruit students or MBAs from, right? So and unless you are from one of those select schools, it becomes quite challenging to actually land a high-profile investment banking job. So those basic research points one should do.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.